The tiger approached the crying girl, and then something unimaginable happened. The morning sun cast golden rays through the dense canopy of Yellowstone National Park as Lisa Collins adjusted her backpack, watching her 4-year-old daughter Emma skip ahead on the trail. The little girl's pigtails bounced with each step, her yellow dress a bright spot against the emerald forest. Richard, Emma's father, walked beside his wife, his experienced biologist's eyes scanning the surrounding wilderness. "Remember, sweetheart, stay where we can see you," Lisa called out, her voice carrying a hint of the exhaustion that came from watching over an energetic preschooler in the wilderness. The family had chosen this remote section of the park deliberately, away from the tourist-heavy zones, seeking a genuine connection with nature and each other. If you found this story interesting, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us which city you're watching from. Stay with us. Emma's laughter echoed through the trees as she discovered yet another fascinating leaf or stone. Both Lisa and Richard couldn't help but smile at their daughter's unbridled enthusiasm. As marine biologists dedicated to environmental conservation, they had always dreamed of sharing their passion for nature with their child. This summer vacation was meant to be that perfect opportunity, a chance to disconnect from their busy lives and immerse themselves in the raw beauty of the wilderness. As they began setting up camp in a small clearing, the afternoon sun filtered through the branches, creating dancing shadows on the forest floor. Emma sat nearby, completely absorbed in her task of organizing a collection of pine cones she had gathered along the way. Lisa watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and wonder, remembering her own childhood fascination with nature. "Look how she categorizes them by size," Richard whispered to his wife. "She's already showing signs of being a scientist." The pride in his voice was unmistakable. But the peaceful scene was about to transform into something neither parent could have anticipated. As Lisa turned to unpack their camping gear, a flash of movement caught Emma's attention. A squirrel, its russet fur gleaming in the sunlight, darted between the trees. Without a second thought, Emma rose to her feet, her eyes locked on the small creature. The moment stretched like honey dripping from a spoon, Emma standing at the edge of the clearing, her small frame poised in anticipation, and the squirrel pausing just long enough to make eye contact before disappearing into the underbrush. In that split second, something changed in the atmosphere of the forest. The air seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Emma took one step forward, then another, her pink shoes crushing fallen leaves beneath them. The squirrel reappeared briefly, just far enough ahead to maintain her interest. It was as if the small creature was deliberately leading her away, drawing her deeper into the forest's embrace. The sound of her parents' voices grew fainter as Emma followed the squirrel, her young mind focused solely on the adventure before her. The trees seemed to part ways, creating a natural path that beckoned her forward. She didn't notice how the marked trail gradually disappeared, or how the forest grew denser with each step. The late afternoon light began to shift, casting longer shadows through the trees. The squirrel had long since vanished, but Emma continued walking, certain that just around the next tree she would find her furry friend. It wasn't until she stepped into a small clearing that reality began to sink in. The familiar sounds of her parents setting up camp had been replaced by the mysterious whispers of an unknown forest. Emma turned around, her heart beginning to race as she realized she couldn't recognize anything around her. The trees, which had seemed so friendly before, now loomed like silent giants. The forest floor, covered in shadows and unfamiliar shapes, appeared different from every angle. The confidence that had carried her forward evaporated like morning dew. Taking a hesitant step back, Emma's foot caught on an exposed root. She tumbled backward, crying out as pain shot through her ankle. Landing hard on the ground, she found herself alone, injured and increasingly afraid. The forest, which had seemed so magical just moments before, now felt overwhelming and alien. As tears began to well up in her eyes, Emma tried to stand, but her ankle protested with sharp stabs of pain. She sank back to the ground, pulling her knees to her chest as the first sob escaped her throat. The sound echoed through the trees, seeming to emphasize just how alone she was. The shadows lengthened around her as she sat there, her small frame shaking with each quiet sob. The forest had transformed from a playground into a maze of uncertainty. And Emma had no idea how to find her way back to the safety of her parents' arms. Little did she know, this moment of despair would mark the beginning of an extraordinary encounter, one that would challenge everything her parents thought they knew about the natural world and transform her own understanding of friendship, trust, and the mysterious connections that can form between the most unlikely of souls. The forest grew quieter as twilight approached, wrapping Emma in a blanket of unfamiliar sounds. Her tears had subsided to occasional hiccups, but the pain in her ankle remained a constant reminder of her predicament. The rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze seemed to whisper secrets she couldn't quite understand, and the deepening shadows played tricks with her imagination. Suddenly, a twig snapped nearby, a sharp, decisive sound that cut through the forest's ambient noise. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she detected movement in the undergrowth. Whatever was approaching was much larger than the squirrel that had led her astray. The sound of heavy paws pressing against fallen leaves grew closer, accompanied by the subtle swish of something large moving through the vegetation. Emma's heart thundered in her chest as she watched a massive shape emerge from the shadows. First came the distinctive striped face, then the muscular shoulders, and finally the full magnificent form of a tiger stepped into the clearing, its amber eyes fixed upon her with an intensity that seemed to peer straight into her soul. Time seemed to stop. Emma sat frozen, her mind unable to process what she was seeing. Tigers didn't live in Yellowstone. This much she knew from her parents' teachings, yet here one stood, mere feet away from her, its presence as real as the ground beneath her. The tiger moved forward with fluid grace, each step deliberate and silent. Emma closed her eyes tightly, expecting the worst, but instead of the danger she anticipated, she felt something completely unexpected, a warm, rough tongue gently licking the tears from her cheeks. She opened her eyes in surprise to find the tiger's face close to hers, its expression almost tender. "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" Emma whispered, her voice trembling but curious. The tiger responded by sitting back on its haunches, maintaining eye contact with a patience that seemed almost human. There was intelligence in those amber eyes that transcended ordinary animal behavior, and Emma felt her fear gradually being replaced by wonder. The tiger moved closer, carefully nudging her with its nose as if encouraging her to stand. Emma grimaced as she attempted to put weight on her injured ankle, and the tiger immediately stilled, watching her intently. Using a fallen branch as a makeshift crutch, Emma managed to pull herself up, surprised to find the tiger adjusting its position to support her if needed. As they began their slow journey through the forest, Emma couldn't help but notice how the tiger seemed to be leading her along a specific path. It moved with purpose, occasionally stopping to look back at her, waiting patiently when she needed to rest. The great cat's behavior defied everything Emma had ever heard about wild animals, even from her wildlife expert parents. The forest around them had grown darker, but Emma felt strangely safe in the presence of her unexpected guardian. The tiger's ears constantly swiveled, catching sounds Emma couldn't hear, and its nose regularly tested the air. Several times, it changed their direction abruptly, as if avoiding something unseen in the gathering dusk. During one of their rest stops, Emma noticed something peculiar about the tiger's behavior. It seemed unusually alert, its muscles tense beneath the striped fur. The animal's head would snap towards certain sounds, and a low growl would rumble in its chest before quickly subsiding. It was as if the tiger was aware of some hidden danger that lurked in the shadows of the forest. "What's wrong?" Emma whispered, picking up on her companion's unease. The tiger's only response was to press closer to her side, its warm bulk providing both comfort and protection. The message was clear: stay close, stay quiet. As they continued their careful progress through the forest, Emma began to notice other strange details. There were marks on some of the trees they passed, not natural scratches, but deliberate patterns that seemed to mean something. The tiger would pause briefly at these marks, its tail twitching as if in recognition. The sound of running water reached their ears, and the tiger guided Emma toward it. Upon reaching a small stream, the great cat stood guard while she quenched her thirst. The cool water was refreshing, but as Emma cupped it in her hands, she noticed something odd reflected in its surface, shadows that seemed to move independently of the forest around them. The tiger's behavior grew increasingly protective. It positioned itself between Emma and certain areas of the forest, particularly when strange sounds echoed through the trees. These weren't the normal noises of woodland creatures. They were something else entirely, something that made the tiger's fur stand on end. In the distance, voices began to carry through the trees, human voices calling her name. Emma's heart leapt at the sound of her parents, but to her surprise, the tiger blocked her path when she tried to move toward the calls. There was urgency in the animal's movements, almost as if it was trying to communicate something crucial. Looking into those intelligent amber eyes once more, Emma made a decision that would have seemed crazy just hours ago. She chose to trust the tiger's judgment. Something in her young heart told her that this magnificent creature wasn't just trying to help her. It was trying to protect her from something that even the searching adults might not be aware of. As night settled fully over the forest, the tiger led Emma toward what appeared to be a natural shelter, a hidden cave system that seemed to have been used before. The entrance was partially concealed by vegetation, and as they approached, Emma could have sworn she saw the faintest glimmer of something unnatural, deeper within the rock face. The mystery of why a tiger was in Yellowstone, why it was helping her, and what it was protecting her from would soon unravel in ways that would challenge everything Emma and her parents believed about the natural world. But for now, as she settled into the relative safety of the cave with her striped guardian keeping watch, Emma could only wonder at the extraordinary turn her adventure had taken. Inside the cave, Emma's eyes gradually adjusted to the dim light filtering through the entrance. The tiger's massive form blocked most of the opening, its striped tail occasionally twitching as it maintained its vigilant watch. As Emma explored her surroundings, her small hands trailing along the cool cave walls, she began to notice things that made her heart race with curiosity and wonder. The cave wasn't simply a natural formation. There were signs of previous human presence everywhere. Faded drawings decorated some of the walls, reminiscent of the native art her parents had shown her in books. But these were different somehow, mixing ancient symbols with more modern elements. Some appeared to depict large cats, similar to her tiger companion, while others showed strange patterns that seemed to shimmer in the failing light. "Did other people stay here too?" Emma whispered, more to herself than to the tiger. Her fingers brushed against something soft, a piece of fabric caught on a rocky outcropping. It was a torn fragment of what looked like a child's jacket, not terribly old, but weathered enough to suggest it had been there for some time. Nearby, she found other items: a small toy car covered in dust, a tattered notebook with illegible writing, and most intriguingly, a bracelet made of wooden beads that seemed to give off a faint, phosphorescent glow. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, Lisa and Richard Collins were living every parent's nightmare. The moment they had noticed Emma's absence, their world had shattered into 1,000 pieces of fear and regret. The forest rangers had arrived quickly after their frantic call, but the search was yielding puzzling results. "This doesn't make any sense," one of the senior rangers muttered, studying the ground where Emma's tracks suddenly vanished. "The prints just stop here as if she—" He trailed off, exchanging a meaningful look with his colleague that didn't go unnoticed by Lisa. "As if she what?" Lisa demanded, her scientific mind struggling to process the impossible data before her. Children don't just vanish into thin air. There has to be an explanation. Richard placed a steadying hand on his wife's shoulder, but his own expression betrayed his growing unease. As biologists, they had spent years studying natural phenomena, but nothing in their experience had prepared them for this. The rangers, dogs, would follow Emma's scent to certain points and then become confused, whining and circling as if they'd lost the trail in impossible ways. Back in the cave, Emma had discovered something even more mysterious. In a small alcove, partially hidden behind a fallen rock, she found what appeared to be a journal. Its pages were yellowed with age, but the handwriting was clear enough to read. As she flipped through it, her young mind struggled to comprehend the implications of what was written there. The journal appeared to belong to another scientist, like her parents, who had been studying something unusual in the park. There were detailed notes about temporal anomalies and guardian spirits, words Emma didn't fully understand, but that made her look at her tiger companion with new eyes. Some pages contained drawings of the same symbols she had seen on the cave walls, along with mathematical equations that reminded her of her father's research papers. The tiger had settled near her now, its large head resting on its paws, but its ears constantly moving, tracking sounds from outside. Emma noticed how its eyes would occasionally fix on certain points in the cave, particularly on areas where the symbols seemed to cluster. When she held up the glowing bracelet she had found, the tiger's attention focused intently on it, and for a moment, Emma could have sworn she saw the symbols on the wall pulse in response. A particularly loud shout from the search party outside made both Emma and the tiger tense. The great cat rose to its feet, moving to the cave entrance with purposeful steps. Its behavior was becoming increasingly complex, not just protective, but almost strategic. When Emma tried to call out to the searching voices, the tiger gently but firmly guided her deeper into the cave, towards an area where the symbols were most concentrated. The journal in her hands seemed to grow warmer, and Emma noticed that some of the writing was beginning to change, the ink shifting and reforming before her eyes. One passage in particular caught her attention. The Guardians appear when they're needed most. They protect not just from physical dangers, but from those who would exploit the power of this place. Not all who search are here to help. Outside the cave, the search was taking an unusual turn. Some of the rangers had begun to act strangely, their interest seeming to focus more on certain areas of the forest than on finding Emma. They spoke in hushed tones about energy readings and temporal signatures, terms that made Lisa and Richard exchange worried glances. "We've seen this before," one ranger whispered to another, not realizing Lisa was within earshot. "Remember the incident last summer? And the children who were found?" "That's enough," his superior cut him off sharply, noticing Lisa's proximity. But the damage was done. Lisa's scientific mind was already racing, connecting dots she hadn't even known existed moments before. In the cave, Emma had fallen into an exhausted sleep, her head resting against the tiger's warm flank. The journal lay open beside her, its pages continuing to shift and change in the darkness. The tiger remained alert, its eyes fixed on the cave entrance, where shadows seemed to move in ways that shadows shouldn't. The mystery of Yellowstone was far deeper than anyone had suspected, and Emma had stumbled into something that went beyond the natural world her parents studied. The tiger wasn't just protecting her from getting lost, it was guarding her from those who might be searching for something far more significant than a missing child. As the night deepened, the symbols on the cave walls began to pulse with a subtle rhythm, like a heartbeat, and the tiger's eyes reflected a knowledge as ancient as the mountains themselves. The true nature of what was happening in this remote corner of Yellowstone was about to be revealed, and it would challenge everything the Collins family believed about the natural world. Dawn approached with tentative fingers of light reaching into the cave, illuminating the strange symbols that had seemed to pulse with their own life during the night. Emma stirred from her sleep, momentarily confused by the warm, striped fur beneath her head. The events of the previous day came rushing back as she met the tiger's steady amber gaze. The journal she had discovered lay nearby, its pages now filled with text that seemed clearer in the growing light. Emma picked it up, her young mind struggling to comprehend the complex words, but understanding enough to know that something extraordinary was happening in this part of Yellowstone. "There are places in this world," she read slowly, "so where the boundaries between what we know and what we don't understand become thin. The Guardians protect these places, keeping balance." Emma looked at the tiger, who seemed to be paying particular attention to her words. "Are you a Guardian?" she whispered to the magnificent creature. The tiger's response was to stand and stretch, then gently nudge her toward a specific section of the cave wall. There, partially hidden behind years of mineral deposits, was a series of drawings that made Emma gasp. They depicted tigers, dozens of them, leading children through the forest, away from dark figures that seemed to shimmer on the stone surface. Outside the cave, the search for Emma had taken an unexpected turn. Lisa Collins had spent the night analyzing the strange comments she'd overheard from the rangers. Her scientific training wouldn't allow her to ignore the patterns emerging. This wasn't the first time a child had gone missing in this specific area, only to be found later, unharmed but changed somehow. Richard. she whispered to her husband as they followed yet another search party. "Something isn't right here. Did you notice how some of the rangers are more interested in taking readings than actually searching? And those devices they're using, they're not standard rescue equipment." Richard nodded grimly. His own suspicions had been growing throughout the night. As a biologist specializing in ecosystem preservation, he had contacts throughout the National Park Service. A quick series of phone calls had revealed disturbing information. There was an entire classified department dedicated to studying unexplained phenomena in Yellowstone, and their interest seemed centered on this particular region. Back in the cave, Emma had made another discovery. Behind a loose rock, she found a small metal box containing what appeared to be scientific instruments, but unlike any she had seen in her parents' laboratory. One device, when she accidentally activated it, produced a holographic display of the surrounding area, showing points of light that seemed to correspond with the symbols on the cave walls. The tiger watched her discoveries with what appeared to be approval, occasionally guiding her away from certain areas of the cave while encouraging her exploration of others. When Emma's stomach growled with hunger, the great cat led her to a hidden chamber where fresh water trickled down the rocks. And surprisingly, wild berries grew despite the lack of direct sunlight. As Emma ate the berries, she noticed something peculiar about the chamber. The air seemed to shimmer in certain spots, like the heat waves above hot pavement that she had seen in the city. When she reached out to touch one of these areas, the tiger gently pulled her back with its teeth, shaking its head in an almost human gesture of warning. The journal provided some context for what she was seeing. "The anomalies appear as distortions in the air," read one passage. "They are doorways, but not all led to places we should visit. The Guardians know which paths are safe. Trust them above all others, even those who claim to be helping." Meanwhile, the search operation had split into two distinct groups. The regular park rangers continued their standard search patterns, but Lisa and Richard noticed a separate team, equipped with sophisticated technology, moving with purpose towards specific coordinates. These individuals wore unmarked uniforms and communicated via encrypted radios. "We need to find her before they do," Lisa whispered to Richard, her maternal instinct screaming that these people's interests might not align with their daughter's safety. The couple began to formulate their own search strategy, using their scientific knowledge of the park's ecosystem to think like their daughter might. In the cave, Emma was beginning to understand that her tiger companion wasn't just protecting her from getting lost, it was guarding her from something far more complex. The journal spoke of a hidden conflict between those who sought to protect the natural balance of these special places and others who wished to exploit their power for unknown purposes. The tiger's behavior became more urgent as the morning progressed. It began guiding Emma through a series of connected chambers, each containing more evidence of previous visitors and more of the mysterious symbols. Some of the markings seemed to respond to their presence, glowing faintly as they passed. What Emma couldn't know was that her parents were getting closer, but so were the mysterious researchers. The tiger's heightened alertness suggested it was aware of both groups approaching. The great cat seemed to be leading her through a carefully planned route, avoiding certain areas while lingering in others, as if waiting for the right moment to proceed. The journal's final pages contained a warning that made Emma's heart race. They will come with devices and promises of safety, but their true goal is to understand and control the power of these places. The Guardians have protected this knowledge for centuries. Trust in their guidance, for they see what we cannot. As the morning light strengthened outside the cave, Emma realized she was part of something far bigger than a simple story of a lost child. The tiger, the cave, the symbols, and the mysterious researchers all pointed to a hidden world existing alongside the one her parents studied. A world where science and magic perhaps weren't so different after all. Morning light filtered through the forest canopy as Lisa and Richard Collins made their way through an unexplored section of the park. They had broken away from the main search party, following their instincts and the strange patterns they'd begun to notice in their environment. The trees here seemed different, older somehow, with peculiar markings etched into their ancient bark. "Look at this," Richard whispered, running his hand over a series of symbols carved into a massive oak. "These aren't random animal scratches or tourist vandalism. They're organized, purposeful, His years of scientific training couldn't explain the faint warmth emanating from the marks, or how they seemed to pulse ever so slightly beneath his fingers. Lisa pulled out her notebook, quickly sketching the symbols. They reminded her of something she'd seen years ago during her graduate research, ancient petroglyphs that supposedly marked sacred spaces where, according to local legends, the natural world intersected with something beyond ordinary understanding. Meanwhile, in the cave system, Emma and her tiger guardian were on the move. The great cat led her through a series of interconnected chambers, each one revealing new wonders. The journal she carried had become more than just a record of previous discoveries. It seemed to respond to their journey, its pages revealing new information as they progressed deeper into the cave system. "Look!" Emma exclaimed softly, pointing to a section of wall where crystalline formations caught the light filtering through hidden fissures in the rock. The crystals seemed to form patterns, similar to the symbols she'd been seeing. But these appeared to be natural growths rather than man-made markings. The tiger's behavior had become increasingly purposeful. It would stop at certain junctions, waiting until Emma held up the journal. The pages would flutter as if caught in a non-existent breeze, and new text would appear, offering guidance about which path to take. Emma began to understand that the cave system wasn't just a random series of tunnels. It was more like an elaborate maze designed to protect something important. Outside, the specialized research team had set up a sophisticated monitoring station. Their equipment detected energy signatures unlike anything they'd recorded before, all centered around the area where Emma had disappeared. The team leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, studied the readings with growing excitement. "The signatures are stronger than ever," she reported into her secure communication device. "Whatever's causing these anomalies, it's becoming more active. We need to move quickly before we lose this opportunity." She hesitated before adding, "And there's something else. The patterns suggest there's a guardian present." Back in the forest, Lisa and Richard had made a breakthrough. They'd noticed that certain species of bioluminescent fungi were growing in patterns that defied natural distribution. Following these patterns led them to discover more carved symbols, each seeming to point them in a specific direction. These markings, Lisa realized, they're not just symbols, they're a map. But a map to what? She remembered something from her conversation with one of the more forthcoming rangers, stories of children who had gone missing in national parks throughout history, only to be found days later, completely unharmed but changed somehow. Speaking of magical encounters and protective beings, in the cave, Emma had reached a chamber unlike any other. The walls were covered in naturally occurring crystals that seemed to sing with a barely audible hum. The tiger sat in the center of the room, its amber eyes fixed on a particular formation that appeared to be growing right before their eyes. The journal in Emma's hands grew warm, its pages turning by themselves to reveal new text. The heart of the sanctuary reveals itself only to those pure of intention. The guardians bring the chosen here not to hide them, but to protect the ancient balance from those who would disturb it. As she read these words aloud, the crystals in the chamber began to pulse with a soft azure bluish light. The tiger moved to stand beside her, its fur seeming to shimmer with the same ethereal glow. Emma felt a strange sensation, as if the very air around them was charged with electricity. The research team's instruments suddenly went haywire. Energy readings spiked off their charts, and their most sensitive equipment began to malfunction. Doctor. Chen ordered her team to converge on the location of the strongest signals, not realizing they were being drawn exactly where the Guardian wanted them to be. Lisa and Richard, following their own path of discovery, felt a subtle vibration through the ground beneath their feet. The symbols they'd been tracking seemed to be leading them toward the same point, but something told them to move cautiously, to respect whatever force was at work in this ancient place. In the crystal chamber, Emma watched in amazement as images began to form in the crystalline surfaces around her, reflections of other times, other children, other guardians. She saw tigers leading young ones through these same caves, century after century, protecting them from those who sought to unravel the mysteries of this sacred space. The tiger's posture changed, becoming more alert. Through the complex network of tunnels, they could hear multiple groups approaching, the research team with their humming equipment, and Emma's parents following the ancient signs. The chamber's crystals pulsed more intensely, and Emma understood that everything was converging toward a moment of truth. The journal's pages turned once more, revealing its most important message yet. When the chosen one stands at the heart of the sanctuary, when those who protect and those who seek collide, the true purpose of the Guardians will be revealed. The balance must be maintained, but understanding can bridge the gap between worlds. Emma placed her hand on the tiger's broad head, feeling the energy coursing through both of them. They weren't hiding anymore, they were waiting. The time had come for secrets long buried in these ancient caves to emerge into the light, for science and mystery to meet, and for a young girl to help bridge the gap between two worlds that had existed side by side since time immemorial. The crystal chamber hummed with increasing intensity as three separate groups converged on its location. Emma stood beside her tiger guardian, watching the crystalline formations pulse with otherworldly light. The journal in her hands had grown warm, its pages continuing to reveal new information as the moment of truth approached. Dr. Chen's research team arrived first, their sophisticated equipment crackling with interference as they entered the outer chambers. Their flashlights cut through the darkness, revealing the ancient symbols that covered the walls. The team's scientists gasped at the sight of the elaborate markings, their instruments recording data that defied conventional explanation. "These energy signatures," Dr. Chen muttered, studying her handheld device. "They're like nothing we've ever seen. The patterns suggest some sort of conscious interaction with the environment." She raised her head, her eyes widening as she noticed the soft glow emanating from deeper within the cave system. Meanwhile, Lisa and Richard Collins had followed the trail of bioluminescent fungi and ancient markings to another entrance. The symbols seemed to grow more pronounced as they proceeded, their subtle glow intensifying with each step. Years of scientific training hadn't prepared them for what they were witnessing, evidence of something that challenged their understanding of the natural world. "Listen," Lisa whispered, placing her hand against the cave wall. "Can you feel it? It's like the whole cave system is alive." The vibrations beneath her palm carried a rhythm that reminded her of a heartbeat, steady and purposeful. In the crystal chamber, Emma watched as images continued to form in the crystalline surfaces around her. She saw glimpses of other times, other children, other guardians, all connected to this ancient place. The tiger stood protectively beside her, its striped coat shimmering with the same ethereal light that filled the chamber. The journal revealed another passage. "The sanctuary exists in the space between what is known and what is hidden. Here, the Guardians maintain the balance between worlds, protecting both the seekers and the sought." Emma understood now that her tiger wasn't just protecting her, it was protecting something far more significant. Dr. Chen's team reached the chamber first, their equipment failing completely as they crossed the threshold. The sight that greeted them left them speechless. A young girl standing beside a magnificent tiger, surrounded by pulsing crystals that defied scientific explanation. "Extraordinary," Dr. Chen breathed, instinctively reaching for her camera before realizing it too had stopped working. "All these years of research, and we never understood. The Guardians weren't just protecting the children, they were protecting the sanctuaries themselves." Lisa and Richard arrived moments later, their parental instincts driving them forward, despite their scientific disbelief at what they were witnessing. "Emma!" Lisa called out, taking a step forward before stopping abruptly. The tiger hadn't moved to attack, but its presence commanded respect. "Mom, Dad!" Emma's voice echoed through the chamber, filled with excitement rather than fear. "You won't believe what I've learned. This place, it's special. And the tiger, it's been protecting me, showing me things that have been hidden for a really long time." The crystals pulsing intensified, and images began forming more rapidly on their surfaces. Dr. Chen and her team watched in amazement as centuries of history played out before them. Ancient peoples discovering the sanctuaries, guardians appearing throughout time to protect them, and the delicate balance that had been maintained between the known world and its mysteries. "All our research," Dr. Chen said, her voice filled with wonder. "We were approaching it all wrong. We thought we were studying anomalies, but we were actually witnessing something far more profound, a sophisticated system of protection that's existed for millennia. The tiger moved forward, its movements graceful and deliberate. To everyone's amazement, it began touching specific crystals with its paw, causing them to emit different tones. The journal in Emma's hands responded, its pages filling with new text that seemed to translate the ancient language being created by the sounds. "The guardians are not just protectors," Emma read aloud, her young voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "They are keepers of balance, ensuring that the power of these places remains in harmony with the natural world. Some secrets are not meant to be unraveled, but understood in their mystery." As she spoke these words, the chamber's energy shifted. The crystal's light focused into patterns that mapped the cave system, revealing it as part of a larger network of sanctuaries across the world. Dr. Chen's team watched as their years of research were simultaneously validated and transformed. Their scientific pursuit had led them to something far more profound than they had imagined. Lisa and Richard moved closer to their daughter, their scientific minds struggling to process what they were witnessing. The tiger watched them approach, its amber eyes reflecting an intelligence that went beyond natural explanation. In that moment, they understood that their daughter hadn't just been lost and found. She had been chosen to bridge a gap between two worlds. The journal continued to reveal its secrets, explaining how throughout history, children had been brought to these sanctuaries not just for protection, but as part of an ancient tradition of maintaining balance between the rational world of science and the mysteries that defied explanation. Each encounter served to ensure that humanity never fully lost its connection to the magic that existed alongside the mundane. As the various groups stood in the crystal chamber, watching the interplay of light and shadow, science and mystery, they began to understand that they were part of something far larger than themselves. The tiger's presence reminded them that some forces in nature couldn't be measured or contained. They could only be respected and protected. The crystal chamber had become a meeting point between two worlds, science and mystery, logic and wonder. As the initial shock of their encounter began to fade, Emma sat cross-legged on the chamber floor, the tiger lounging protectively beside her while she shared her discoveries with both her parents and Dr. Chen's team. "The journal showed me that this has been happening for hundreds of years," Emma explained, her small fingers tracing the symbols that now glowed softly on the ancient pages. "Children have always been able to see things that grown-ups sometimes forget to notice. That's why the guardians choose us." Dr. Chen knelt beside Emma, her years of scientific skepticism giving way to genuine wonder. "All our research, all our theoretical models, we were detecting fragments of something far more sophisticated than we imagined. These sanctuaries aren't just anomalies, they're part of a living system that maintains balance in the natural world." Lisa and Richard watched their daughter with a mixture of pride and amazement. The journal in Emma's hands continued to reveal new information, responding to her touch in a way it hadn't for any of the adults who tried to handle it. The tiger's presence seemed to amplify this connection, its amber eyes reflecting wisdom accumulated over centuries of guardianship. "Look at this," Emma said excitedly, turning to a new page that had just revealed itself. The journal showed detailed drawings of other sanctuaries around the world, hidden places where the boundaries between the ordinary and the extraordinary grew thin. Each location was marked with symbols similar to those that covered the cave walls. These sanctuaries form a network, Dr. Chen realized, her scientific mind beginning to grasp the magnitude of what they were discovering. They're like nodes in a vast web of natural energy that encompasses the entire planet. Our instruments were picking up just tiny fragments of these connections. The tiger rose and approached one of the larger crystal formations. As it moved, its stripes seemed to shift and flow like living shadows. The great cat pressed its paw against the crystal surface, causing ripples of light to spread throughout the chamber. Images began forming in the crystalline walls, visions of other guardians, other sanctuaries, all connected through time and space. "The guardians aren't just protecting individual children or places," Emma read from the journal as new text appeared. "They're protecting the balance between worlds. Without these sanctuaries, the connection between the physical world and the realm of natural magic would fade away completely." Richard, the biologist in him unable to resist questioning, asked, "But why choose children? Why bring them to these places?" The tiger turned its gaze to him, and for a moment Richard felt as if he could understand the ancient wisdom behind those amber eyes. Emma found the answer appearing in the journal. Children see with hearts unclouded by doubt. They understand instinctively what adults must struggle to remember, that the world is filled with wonders that can't be measured or explained, only experienced and protected. Dr. Chen's team had set up their functioning equipment in a corner of the chamber, documenting everything they could, but the readings they received seemed to change every time they looked at them, as if the sanctuary itself was showing them that some things couldn't be captured by scientific instruments. "We've been going about this all wrong," Dr. Chen admitted, shutting down her last working device. "We wanted to study and classify these phenomena, to bring them under human control. But that was never the point. These sanctuaries don't need to be controlled. They need to be preserved." The tiger moved to the center of the chamber, and the crystals responded to its presence, creating a three-dimensional map of light that filled the space around them. It showed the flow of natural energies across the planet, connecting all living things in ways that science was only beginning to understand. "The guardians appear when these connections are threatened," Emma continued reading. "They bring the chosen ones to the sanctuaries, not just to protect them, but to ensure that each generation remembers the importance of maintaining balance between the physical world and the mysteries that give it life." Lisa watched her daughter with new understanding. The scientist in her had always sought to explain everything through careful observation and analysis. But here, in this ancient chamber with its living crystals and impossible tiger, she began to appreciate that some truths existed beyond the reach of scientific instruments. The journal's pages turned again, revealing what looked like a contract written in both modern English and ancient symbols. Those who discover the sanctuaries must choose to protect their secrets while sharing their wisdom, or to remain forever separate from their magic. Dr. Chen stood, facing her team. "We need to make a decision," she said quietly. "Everything we've learned here, everything we've seen, do we try to study it, to break it down into data and measurements, or do we become part of something greater than ourselves?" The tiger watched them all, its presence a reminder of the weight of their choice. This wasn't just about scientific discovery or personal wonder. It was about becoming part of an ancient tradition that had preserved the world's magic for countless generations. As they considered their decision, the crystals continued to pulse with gentle light. And the journal in Emma's hands waited to record whatever choice they would make. The sanctuary had revealed its secrets not to be studied, but to be understood and protected. Now, it was up to them to decide how to honor that sacred trust. The crystalline chamber fell into a contemplative silence as Dr. Chen's team members exchanged meaningful glances. One by one, they began shutting down their remaining equipment, removing batteries from devices, and closing their laptops. The choice between scientific ambition and sacred trust wasn't just about their careers anymore. It was about preserving something precious that had survived centuries of human advancement. "I've spent my entire career searching for proof of phenomena that defied conventional explanation," Dr. Chen said, placing her last sensor carefully in its case. "Now I understand that some truths aren't meant to be proven, they're meant to be experienced and protected." The tiger moved through the group, its presence both majestic and approving. As it passed each person, the crystals nearest to them pulsed with warm light, as if acknowledging their decision. Emma sat with the journal open in her lap, watching as new text appeared on its pages. "The guardians recognize those who choose to protect the balance," she read aloud. "From this moment forward, you become part of an ancient lineage, not just witnesses to the mystery, but keepers of its continued existence." Lisa and Richard moved closer to their daughter, their scientific backgrounds now enriched by a deeper understanding of the world's mysteries. The tiger settled beside them, creating a picture that seemed to echo through time. Parents, child, and guardian, united in protecting something greater than themselves. "But how do we protect it?" Richard asked, his practical nature seeking direction. "What exactly are we supposed to do with this knowledge?" The journal's pages turned by themselves, revealing elaborate diagrams and text that seemed to shift between ancient symbols and modern language. "The sanctuaries must remain hidden," Emma read, "but their wisdom can be shared in ways that preserve their mystery while enriching the world's understanding of nature's deeper truths. Dr. Chen approached the largest crystal formation, studying its intricate patterns with new eyes. "We've been documenting everything wrong," she realized. "Instead of trying to measure and quantify these phenomena, we should have been learning from their example, how they maintain balance, how they connect different aspects of the natural world." The tiger pressed its paw against another crystal, causing a series of images to ripple across the chamber walls. They showed glimpses of other sanctuaries around the world, caves in distant mountains, ancient groves deep in forests, hidden valleys where the boundaries between worlds grew thin. Each location had its own guardians, its own chosen protectors, all working in harmony to maintain the delicate balance between science and magic. "Look at this," Emma exclaimed, pointing to new text appearing in the journal. "It says that each sanctuary is connected to others through what it calls threads of wonder, like a web that holds the world's magic in place. When people stop believing in magic, some of these threads start to break." Lisa wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders, understanding now why the tiger had chosen Emma. "That's why the guardians bring children to these places," she said softly. "Children remind us that there's more to the world than what we can measure and explain." The chamber's crystals began to pulse in a rhythmic pattern, and the tiger's attention focused on a particular formation that seemed to be growing before their eyes. As they watched, the crystal took on the shape of a tree, its branches reaching toward the ceiling while its roots spread across the floor in glowing lines. "The Tree of Connection," Emma read from the journal. "It shows how everything is linked, science and magic, nature and wonder, past and present. The guardians protect these connections, keeping them strong even when people forget they exist." Dr. Chen's team gathered around the crystal tree, their scientific curiosity now tempered with reverence. One of the younger researchers pointed to patterns in the root system that matched known ley lines and natural energy fields they had documented in their previous work. "We weren't wrong about the connections," Dr. Chen observed. "We just didn't understand their true purpose. These aren't just energy patterns, they're the foundations that keep our world in balance." The tiger moved to stand beside the crystal tree, its striped coat seeming to mirror the patterns of light flowing through the formation. The journal in Emma's hands continued to reveal new information, explaining how each sanctuary contributed to the larger network of natural magic that encircled the globe. "Being a keeper of the balance doesn't mean we have to stop being scientists," Lisa realized, watching the interplay of light and shadow. "It means we need to approach our work with awareness of its impact on both the physical world and the mysteries that give it life." The crystal chamber had become more than just a hiding place. It was a classroom where ancient wisdom met modern understanding, where the boundaries between known and unknown blurred into something new and wonderful. The tiger's presence reminded them that some forces in nature couldn't be contained or controlled, only respected and protected. As they absorbed these lessons, the journal revealed one final truth. The sanctuaries weren't just places of power. They were reminders of humanity's role as stewards of both the natural world and its mysteries. The choice to become keepers of this balance wasn't just about protecting secrets. It was about preserving the wonder that made life truly meaningful. The tiger's amber eyes met each person in turn, seeming to seal their commitment to this new path. They were no longer just observers of nature's mysteries. They had become part of the ancient legacy that kept those mysteries alive. In that moment, science and magic, wonder and wisdom merged into a deeper understanding of their place in the world's grand design. The crystal chamber's light had shifted to match the changing day outside, casting rainbow patterns across the ancient walls. Dr. Chen and her team had begun the careful process of documenting their equipment's locations, not to study the sanctuary, but to ensure they could protect its boundaries from future intrusion. The tiger watched their work with attentive eyes, occasionally guiding them away from areas that needed to remain untouched. Emma sat with her parents, the journal open between them, as they learned about their new roles as sanctuary keepers. "Each guardian works with human protectors," she read aloud, her finger tracing the flowing script. "The tigers choose the children, but the adults maintain the balance in the outside world." Lisa and Richard exchanged glances, Years of scientific training now blending with their new understanding of nature's deeper mysteries. So that's why some of our research felt incomplete, Lisa mused. We were measuring the physical world without considering its connection to these sanctuaries. The tiger approached their small group, pressing its massive head gently against Emma's shoulder. The journal's pages turned by themselves, revealing maps of the park that showed hidden pathways and sacred spaces they had never noticed before. Glowing lines connected these locations, forming a complex web of energy that pulsed with life. "Look at this," Richard said, pointing to familiar research sites. "All those anomalous readings we've detected over the years, they weren't errors in our data. They were signs of the sanctuary's influence on the surrounding ecosystem." Dr. Chen joined them, her usual clipboard replaced by the ancient journal that had appeared in her own pack, a symbol of her new role as a scientific guardian of the sanctuary's secrets. "We need to restructure our entire approach to studying these areas," she said. "Not to expose their mysteries, but to better protect them." The chamber's crystals began to pulse with renewed energy, and images formed on their surfaces, showing how previous generations of keepers had maintained the balance between scientific progress and natural magic. They watched as indigenous peoples, explorers, scientists, and children all played their parts in protecting these sacred spaces throughout history. "The Guardians don't just protect the sanctuaries," Emma read from a newly appeared page. "They protect the world's ability to wonder, to believe in things that can't be explained. Without these places, people might forget that not everything needs to be understood to be important." The tiger moved to the center of the chamber, where the crystal tree still glowed with inner light. As they watched, new branches began to form, representing the adding of their own group to the ancient network of protectors. Each person's name appeared in flowing script along the branches, written in both modern letters and ancient symbols. "We're part of it now," Dr. Chen realized, watching her name merge with the crystal's light. "Every discovery we make, every decision we take, it all affects the balance we're now sworn to protect." Lisa wrapped an arm around Emma's shoulders, watching as her daughter's name appeared in the brightest light, directly connected to the tiger's own magical signature. "You were chosen for a reason, sweetheart," she said softly. "You helped us all remember how to see the world through eyes unclouded by doubt." The journal continued to reveal its secrets, showing them how to maintain their scientific work while protecting the sanctuary's mysteries. They learned about natural markers that would help them identify other sacred spaces and how to guide their research away from areas that needed to remain hidden. "The balance doesn't require us to abandon science," Richard noted, studying a passage about historical keepers who had been renowned researchers. "It asks us to understand that some mysteries serve a purpose by remaining mysterious." The tiger's presence had become more than just protective, it was instructive. Through subtle gestures and gentle guidance, it showed them how to read the forest's hidden signs, how to recognize the boundaries between ordinary and extraordinary spaces, and how to maintain the delicate balance between discovery and preservation. Emma found herself understanding the tiger's unspoken language with increasing clarity. "It's showing us how to be true guardians," she explained to the others. "Not just protecting the sanctuary, but helping it thrive." As the day progressed, they began making plans for their return to the outside world. Dr. Chen's team would need to carefully modify their research parameters, finding ways to study the park's ecosystem that respected the sanctuary's boundaries. Lisa and Richard would integrate their new understanding into their own scientific work, becoming part of the ancient network of protector scientists who had long served as bridges between worlds. The journal provided guidance for these transitions, showing them how previous keepers had maintained their professional integrity while protecting the sanctuary's secrets. It was a delicate balance, but one that had been successfully maintained for generations. "We're not just keeping secrets," Dr. Chen said, watching her team prepare for their departure. "But we're protecting something essential to the world's well-being, the ability to believe in wonders that exist beyond our understanding." The tiger moved through the group one last time, its presence a reminder of the extraordinary trust that had been placed in them. The crystal chamber's light seemed to embrace them all, marking them as the newest members of an ancient fellowship dedicated to preserving the balance between science and magic. As they prepared to leave the sanctuary, Emma felt the weight of the journal in her hands and saw the wisdom in the tiger's eyes. They were about to step back into the ordinary world, but they would carry with them an extraordinary purpose, protecting the delicate balance that kept wonder alive in a world increasingly focused on explanation and proof. The sun was setting over Yellowstone National Park, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple as the group emerged from the sanctuary. The tiger walked beside Emma, its massive form now visible only to those who had been chosen as keepers of the balance. To others who might pass by, it would appear as nothing more than a trick of light and shadow among the trees. Remember, Emma read from the journal's final pages, the sanctuary reveals itself differently to each person who encounters it. To some, it remains hidden in plain sight. To others, it appears as a dream half-remembered. But to its chosen guardians, it will always be a bridge between worlds. Dr. Chen's team had carefully dismantled their research station, leaving no trace of their presence. Their equipment, once designed to measure and quantify the sanctuary's energy, would be repurposed to help protect its boundaries. The young scientists spoke in hushed, excited tones about their new mission, already planning how to redirect their research to support their role as protectors. "We'll need to modify our published findings," Dr. Chen said, making notes in her new journal, not to hide the truth, but to ensure that future discoveries lead others to understand the importance of preserving these spaces, whether they know their true nature or not. Lisa and Richard walked hand in hand, their scientific worldview forever expanded by what they had witnessed. The forest around them seemed more alive now, filled with subtle signs and symbols they had previously overlooked. Their daughter skipped ahead with the tiger, her innocent wisdom having helped bridge the gap between knowledge and wonder. "The strangest thing," Richard mused, watching Emma with the magnificent creature, "is that it all makes perfect sense now. All those unexplained phenomena we've encountered in our research, they weren't anomalies to be solved, but signs pointing to a deeper truth about the natural world." The journal in Emma's hands continued to reveal new insights as they walked, its pages flowing with wisdom accumulated over centuries of guardianship. "Each generation of keepers adds their own understanding to the sanctuary's story," she read. "Science and magic grow together, like branches of the same ancient tree." As they reached the edge of the park's restricted area, the tiger paused. Emma turned to her extraordinary companion, understanding that their visible journey together was coming to an end. The great cat's amber eyes held centuries of wisdom, and its presence had forever changed their understanding of the world. "Will I see you again?" Emma asked softly, wrapping her arms around the tiger's neck one last time. The journal answered her question with fresh text appearing on its pages. "The guardians are always present, visible or not, watching over those who protect the balance. You need only look with eyes that remember how to see." Dr. Chen approached the tiger, bowing slightly in respect. "We'll honor our commitment," she promised. "Our research will protect these spaces, not expose them. The world needs its mysteries as much as its discoveries." The tiger acknowledged each of them in turn, its gaze carrying the weight of centuries. Then, with fluid grace, it stepped back into the forest. Its form seemed to shimmer and fade, becoming one with the evening shadows, though Emma could still feel its protective presence. "The sanctuary has changed us all," Lisa observed, watching the spot where the tiger had disappeared. "We've become part of something ancient and wonderful, a tradition of protecting the magic that keeps the world in balance." As they made their way back to the main park area, Emma noticed how different everything looked now. The forest was filled with subtle signs and markers she hadn't seen before, nature's own language pointing the way to hidden wonders. The journal had taught them to read these signs, to understand the delicate dance between the visible world and its mysteries. The next morning, as the Collins family prepared to leave Yellowstone, they found fresh tiger prints around their campsite, a reminder of their extraordinary experience and ongoing responsibility. Dr. Chen's team had already begun their work of restructuring their research programs, finding ways to protect the sanctuary while advancing scientific understanding. Emma sat at the picnic table, making her final entry in the journal. As she wrote, her words transformed into both modern text and ancient symbols. "The guardians choose those who can help others believe in magic, without needing to prove it exists. Sometimes the greatest discoveries come not from explaining mysteries, but from protecting them. The story of the sanctuary and its tiger guardian would live on, not as a scientific paper or a documented phenomenon, but as part of the endless cycle of wonder that kept the world's magic alive. Each generation would add its own chapter to this ancient tale, finding new ways to bridge the gap between what could be explained and what should simply be believed. As your narrator, I invite you to look around your own world with new eyes. Perhaps there are sanctuaries hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who remember how to see them. Like Emma and her family, we're all part of this continuing story, guardians of the delicate balance between knowledge and wonder. If this tale has touched your heart, consider subscribing to our channel for more stories that explore the mysterious spaces between what we know and what we believe. Leave a comment sharing your own encounters with unexplainable wonders, and join our community of modern-day guardians who keep the spirit of magic alive in an increasingly scientific world. Remember, as the tiger taught Emma, some truths are felt rather than proven, and the most precious discoveries are often the ones we protect rather than explain. Until our paths cross again in another tale of wonder, keep your eyes open and your heart ready for magic.